Welcome to Dress Stories. Today we have this absolutely fantastic person who has joined us. And I'm going to say that this is going to be a little bit of an unusual one because we have so much to talk about. It's going to be in two parts. So I just wanted to welcome you, Sheila, for coming. And I am so excited to get chatting about fashion.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I think that we have known each other for a long time. And when I considered doing a half-hour episode, I just thought, no, that's not going to happen because we could probably talk for 3 hours, but we would have to have a mini-series then.
Lots of stories.
Yes,
lots of stories.
So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm retired now. I had a very long career, almost 50 years from the start to the finish. And so I actually grew up in a very small town in northern Alberta and made my way to the University of Alberta, graduated, worked for many years, raised children. And throughout that entire period, I've had a fascination for, broadly speaking, I would say culture, art, design, textiles, fashion, beauty, and it would be a little bit of a side gig for me, because my work was very intense and very serious and took most of my mental energy. So for me, this was a way of enjoying life and nourishing myself in a very pleasurable way.
Isn't that the way? I mean, we have to have something that balances that out. We have to, whether we, you and I have talked about this before, whether we go to an art gallery outside of the city just to see beautiful things and it recharges us.
Right. And I think I came to it very early because of my mother. She, from the very earliest days I can remember, she was so creative and so imaginative. And she, used to create clothing at a couture level, really. And she would take us as young girls to shop for fabrics. And I can remember going to Jelly Brands in Edmonton. I couldn't have been more than, I'd say, 8 years old.
I always think of Jelly Brands as a dry cleaner. Was it a fabric?
It was a fabric store many years ago. And so she would take us with her, trailing along, 4 little girls and then 5, looking at beautiful fabric. And she would bring it home and create something with it. And she did oil painting and she did every conceivable artisanal kind of craft that you could do, knitting and crocheting and needlepoint. And
did she also work?
And she worked, yeah. Wow. She worked outside of the home. And the house was chaotic as a result of that. I mean, there was, never any order. And so we all kind of craved order in our lives after that. But it was a very, very kind of rich environment from that perspective. And I can say we grew up in this village where there really wasn't very much of that, but she made what she could of it. And so I developed this love of those kinds of arts. And I learned to sew, and I sewed my clothes before I went to university so that I could go to university with something better than a pair of jeans. And that began. And so then gradually it, when I began to have the opportunity to travel. I traveled for 18 months after finishing school and starting work. And so almost everywhere I went, I saw things that just would expand my imagination and my sort of creative orientation. And so that's how it began. And so part of that became collecting textiles, which I've done in all of these years of travel since the early 70s.
So here's a question. When you were trailing behind your mom, did you just know that you wanted to feel and touch those fabrics, and how were your sisters in that? Were you the only one out of all of your sisters who loved that and knew right from that time that you had that affinity and attraction to textiles?
One of my sisters became, she could use her hands to do anything, and she collected beautiful things as well, and she collected ceramics and textiles and art. Two of them actually painted,
Oh, wonderful. Wow, that's a beautiful legacy from your mom.
Yeah, so, it's just something that we grew up with, I guess, and And it was a wonderful escape. And it became an escape pretty much the rest of my life to indulge in culture in that way.
I think you're still, I see you when you come into stores, and I've also had the privilege of being with Sheila outside of Edmonton. And you can just hover, and there is a thing about hovering over a rack and just gravitating. It's almost a magnetic energy of, oh, look at this fabric, or look at this fabric. You and I both have that.
Right. And yeah, we've had a long and very, I would say, loving, kind of fruitful friendship over the years. And, it began during kind of a very sad period of my life. I was dealing with my late husband's illness, and I used to come on Saturday afternoon and spend time with Angela. And we would talk about all these things that we loved and look at books and, look at what was in the store. And it turned into, I think, a very, from my perspective, very enduring friendship, a very rich friendship, which we've had the opportunity to travel together, pursuing our love of, design and fashion. And so it's been great.
So talking a little bit more about your growing up, was your mom, was she fashionable, though, in what is considered fashionable, or was it more just...
Oh, I think she was fashionable. I think she used Vogue patterns. I can't be really sure of that, but I remember some of the designs, some of the sheaths that she would wear. She wore hats.
Oh, wonderful.
As did her mother. So it was an era, I think the 60s and 70s, where people did dress up. It wasn't like today. There were no tracksuits and ski jackets, If you were going out, you dressed. And she wore pearls, and she wore, costume jewelry. It was modest, a very modest household, but, there was always room for that style. I'd say style.
Did she try and influence you in any way, or in how you dressed, or did you sort of have carte blanche when you were young?
I think when we were young, it wasn't present to mind, really. It wasn't a big thing for us when I was in junior high or high school. Dressing was really not an issue, but she did make beautiful things for us, for graduations, for parties, for special events. So, no, the focus when I went to high school anyway was not at all about clothing. It was about academics and sports in high school.
Right. So you weren't being commissioned by your friends quite yet to make clothes for you?
No, nothing like that, no.
All I could do was we would cut our jeans, and put the triangle of fabric in, and we would...
Right.
I mean, yeah. But my mom sewed, and I think that's also generational.
It was generational.
You could sew and make beautiful clothes. Like, I'm going to ask you a question. Like, do you remember your first shopping trip? Because even shopping... If you're small town, we weren't small town. We were from Edmonton, but my mom bought most of our clothes from this year's catalog or something, and we never really got to pick it, until we were much older. My first, I think, shopping trip was Le Chateau with an out-of-town aunt. But do you remember going?
I remember my first job. I was a nanny when I finished grade 10. I went away and I was a nanny for the summer with a family who flew me to Victoria to live in a mansion for the summer. It was like glorious and beautiful. And it was, again, very sort of, it just fueled my imagination. There was a huge library in this house. I could read all summer when I wasn't working and I was looking after kids. Anyway, I earned some money. And so, yes, that was my first shopping trip. And it was at the time that on Jasper Avenue, there were all those little boutiques. So this would be in the 60s. And I remember I bought a leather jacket. I bought some Angora sweaters. Like, it was amazing to have money to spend and buy clothes. So that would be my first time I remember shopping.
That's fabulous. Yeah, we don't have those boutiques anymore.
No.
Well, not in that area now. You have to come over here to 124th Street. But there's not enough retail, right? I mean, there's not. So I already know the answer to this, but you like secondhand too, right?
Right,
You've always
of course,
secondhand.
Of course, yeah. And When did that start? Long before it was fashionable to do so, because it was just so much more interesting, and my day-to-day wardrobe was very professional, suits and white shirts and, dresses that were business style. And so I was always looking for interesting things. Coincidentally, all these years, I think first in 1970, maybe 9, I was traveling to New York almost every year for many years. And so I would just indulge in everything, the art, the theater, the show.
Nobody knew you.
And nobody knew me. And I found amazing shopping, amazing places to go to find things secondhand and consignment and buy real pieces. And eventually this kind of grew into an annual shopping trip and New York trip with one of my friends. And I had located this shop on the Upper East Side where a woman would see the two of us coming, the woman who ran the
She'd
shop.
probably be going, cha-ching. No.
Cha-ching, cha-ching. And she'd lock the door and pull out a bottle of champagne.
Oh,
and it was a little tiny boutique. And she had the most amazing things like Hermes coats and Chanel. And I still have 2 Hermes raincoats from that era. And they were so affordable, like unbelievably affordable. You could never find them like that today, even taking into account, the exchange rate changes and the inflation and everything else. You could never find things like that, I think, today.
Right.
But we had more fun than you can possibly imagine in that little shop, since closed, and went back for years and years. I even took my daughters there.
Because she retired, or you don't know?
I'm not sure. We went back after COVID and she was gone and I wasn't able to find her online or anywhere else, so I don't know what happened.
That's a great memory.
Yeah, a great memory.
So I know that you love accessories, so I want to see what you brought in this pink box here.
Okay. Okay, so for many years in a row, my friend and I, and originally my late husband and I, went to Palm Springs for the Vintage Collectible and Art Show, the convention that they had mid-February of every year. And so this I found, it's a Judith Hendler piece.
It is. I think you should take it out of the
Model
box.
it?
Yes. Even hold it.
Oh, okay.
That is not.
And it's in the era, it's the 60s and 70s. It's in the acrylic era. And I collected quite a few of her pieces over the years. One was a similar bracelet, but in a beautiful I think it's lucite, actually.
That is absolutely stunning. You don't even need clothes.
You don't even... Good. Anyway, beautiful things. And I got, over the years, quite a few beautiful pieces. And in fact, I was one time in Phoenix, I don't know what I was doing there, at an antique mall, just passing the time of day. And I found for $30, like this, 4-inch wide green acrylic bracelet that is like this style. But, and I think in Phoenix, in that era, no one really appreciated its value. But
when you're wearing this, I'm sure no one has anything like that here.
No. I mean, that's
the fun.
That's the fun. It's just having something unique and just enjoying the beauty of it. And I've sort of, over the years, gravitated more and more towards minimalist dressing, and part of that is informed by my love of the Japanese aesthetic. But accessories make that very possible, right? All you need is a black dress or two. Right. And then if you have the hats, you have the jewelry.
So I think you should show a couple of these pieces.
These I got right here at Swish. An amazing, gorgeous.
So I have to admit that when she came, I was like, I forgot about that. Oh, wow, I forgot about
how many years ago.
Wow. This is actually Lanvin, which Lanvin Bakelite. That is
exquisite. I went through a Bakelite phase, a whole Bakelite phase, where everywhere I would go, any antique store, any vintage store, any store, I found Bakelite. And
that is
just beautiful.
And like you said, a black dress.
And that's all.
Spectacular piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
And I know you brought one other set of jewelry, so maybe
we'll do that.
Look at that.
And this I also got here at Swish. And it is a stunning Oscar de la Renta set.
Oh,
I know.
Still my
So gorgeous, eh? So beautiful. And a bracelet. I have a love of bracelets. I love bracelets and earrings. And so
it's kind of got that Chanel, there's that Chanel collection that was the Gripou. I don't know how you say it, Gripoix. And it had that jeweled kind of look to it but this is, wow.
I would say 70s. I'm not sure, but
It's
I would say
beautiful.
70s.
Absolutely beautiful.
So, yeah.
So what is probably your most cherished piece?
Oh, wow. This is a very hard question, but one thing I did bring with me, again, this would be the early 2000s, a trip to Laguna Beach. We found a milliner working there who had been trained in New York, and so I got this hat.
This is so beautiful.
And I have quite a large collection of hats. I love
You were going to say I have quite a large
head.
Because people have a little bit of a large head, but
Yeah,
that
I do.
is- Wow.
And this one came from Palm Springs, and I wear this during the wintertime almost every day. I love this hat.
It's a beautiful hat. It looks like the Oscar de la Renta jewelry.
It does. It's an era, too. And so Palm Springs vintage shopping is outstanding.
Beautiful.
So I love my hats.
And what is in this little box here that's hiding?
Oh, and
Tell
I
us the
forgot.
story.
I also told you this story, which I'm going to tell now because, again, it sounds a little bit far-fetched, but I was in Milan with my son shopping, traveling, looking at art, and I looked in my guidebook and looked for hat shops and went to a hat shop, found a hat shop there in Milan, and it was Audrey Hepburn's hat shop. It was the place where that family, the famous shop. And there were 3 generations of women that were there as milliners, and probably the men too, I don't know. But anyway, I got a couple of pieces from there, and I eventually got remarried recently, and I ordered a hat from there. I didn't bring it with me today. But anyway, it's a trail through my life of collecting these hats, is all I'm saying. And,
That's fantastic.
And if you have a passion or a love for something, you can go and find it wherever it is you are in the world, whether you're here at Swish or whether you're in Paris or Milan. So,
Right.
just to encourage people. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it takes some ingenuity to go and find what you love.
Is your husband? My husband now gets such a kick out of finding a vintage store before I do, because we'll be walking on the street and he'll say, oh, "Look it, there's a vintage shop," and he's so excited that he's trying to bring that joy to me and pointing it out. Like, when we were in. When I turned 50, I went to Europe for the very first time, which is so shocking. But anyways, I feel so lucky. We went to Venice, and there was a vintage shop, but it was not quite like your New York experience. She had a rack of Hermes trench coats. Oh. She had gowns, like Fortuny gowns. Oh. She said, "Oh, would you like to try them on?" I said, "No, thank you," because they were, 20,000 euros for the gowns. But, is your husband on board with your passion for finding these great boutiques and when you travel, or you kind of do your
That's an interesting question. He's quite a fashionista in his own right. That extends into design and art, and he loves beautiful things similarly. And so we do walk the streets wherever we go, but the real kind of intense looking, hunting and gathering, like I like to say, usually it's with my women friends or with you or with people. It takes a lot of time and concentration. I don't
either get it or you. My husband would say, "I'm next door having a glass of wine." He likes to help me find this store, but then then he sighs a lot.
Right. Well, I think he appreciates the consequences. He loves that I love beautiful things, but he's got his own way of doing things. So,
right. So what is in this? What is this piece?
I thought it would be interesting. You suggested I should bring along, because of my passion for textiles, I should bring along something that I have acquired over the years. And so The piece I brought is a silk sari from India, which I bought as a gift for someone in 1978. I should say we did. 1978.
Wow.
Yes, and then after the recipient of the gift passed away, it came back to me in a very generous act by someone. And so I was able to wear it to my son's wedding 2 years ago in New Delhi. So it went back to New Delhi. I had bought it in New Delhi, or we had bought it in New Delhi, and it went back to New Delhi. So that was 1978, and I can say that probably was about the time I began this fascination with textiles. And I think every country that I've been to in the interim, and the highlights I think the highlight of that sort of voyage would be Uzbekistan, where they make these amazing fabrics and textile designs. But I think in every country I've been to, I've found something beautiful, whether in a vintage or antique store. One I did in Buenos Aires, I brought back a woven textile that I've now framed that was made out of it was dyed with the product of beetles were squashed back in the day to make this red, beautiful, deep, deep red dye. And I found it in the corner of an antique shop. There was a whole pile of them, and I brought
that magnetic hand, right?
That magnetic hand going over to the corner of that shop. And now they're framed and on the wall. And so throughout quite a long life of travel, I'm going to say since this was 1978, I've just found beautiful things, and I have no compunctions about bringing them home with me. And so, they grace our beds and our walls and my closet. So it's been fun.
I think that's so fantastic. And the fact that, had you known back then that you would be wearing this to your son's wedding
40 years later or more, yeah.
That's amazing and brilliant.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still beautiful.
It's still beautiful. It's pristine. It's perfect.
Beautiful has no time limit, right?
And it's not
a trend. It's not.
Yes, it's not a fad, and it's not culturally specific. There's beauty, as we know, in every sort of culture and walk of life and country and community. In fact, yesterday evening, I told this story once already today. I was out at Fabricland in that mall way in the north of Edmonton. I forgot the name of it, but I had a very unusual reason for being there. But while I was in this fabric store, there was a tall, impossibly handsome, I think, Indigenous man, and he had a bolt of black lace fabric in his arm. And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" He said, "I'm a drag queen. I'm getting ready for my performance on Friday night." And I thought, boy, I'd like to go. Where is it? So that was the conversation. And then a few minutes later when I left, I walked into the washroom just outside this Fabricland store. And it was all black and white and brightly lit and like a really interesting space. Who would have ever thought? And there was a woman there, and she was in full hijab, black, sparkly hijab, and she was doing a dance in front of the mirror to the Christmas music and she too was like so beautiful. I was mesmerized by her, and I told her so. Anyway, she was filming herself in the peace and quiet of that large, beautiful black and white bathroom, and she looked amazing. So it's not culturally specific. It's something that is shared, I think, by people across gender, across class, across race, across community, across the world, is this breath you can take from the, hustle bustle of life into your own aesthetic sense of beauty.
Wow. That's what it's all about. And we've talked before about it's not cultural appropriation either. We had a guest this season who we were talking about clothing from Palestine that is just so spectacular and so beautiful, and I want to wear it all. And as long as you are giving credit to the community who made it. And you're also, like in Japan, we talk about, I know that in our part 2, we're going to see a kimono that Sheila brought. We've heard that with kimonos, it's not, as long as you're not dressing, as a geisha girl, or we've also heard that there's certain ways of having of folding it. If you have it this way, it means that that's how you are in death. Which I did not know that. And I think that, we might learn from being more mindful in that way, but there's so many things. Like, you know what, before we end this episode, because we're going to end this one, but I want to see this under the hat, because that looks like an Indian piece or a... What are these beautiful pieces? Oh, that's okay. We have the cascade of
beautiful things.
So tell us about these amazing pieces that you brought, because these also look like they are from elsewhere.
Yes. Well, this came from the same trip, most recent trip to India, to my son's wedding, which was in New Delhi. We took the trip up to Jaipur and Agra, and this was my Christmas present from my husband. It's a beautiful handmade shawl from Kashmir.
I always wish that I could have people have feel-a-rama so that they can feel how
because touch is part of it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is just so beautiful. And all of that stitching, and yeah, it's amazing.
So I was traveling with 2 women friends and visiting the sister of one of them who was then working in Vietnam. So we went to Siem Reap to see the temples, and we were just beside the market in a little local restaurant, and there was a door, and it seemed to be leading off into another space that looked like it might be an art gallery. So we went through that door, and we went in, and then it was the most incredible thing. There was Eric, I'd have to look up his name here, his last name, but he was a designer and fashionista who was showing clothes in New York and Paris on the runways, and he was there working because, of course, it's a center for the production of silk.
Oh, wow.
He said some of the finest silks in the world, and he had an entire gallery of stunning and beautiful things, and so we all bought some of these shawls, which are like flutter like birds.
They are just, again, if there was feel-a-rama, this is like
exquisite silk, like air. It could pass through a ring. It's so fine.
Wow.
And so we tried on many beautiful things and took many photographs and enjoyed him very much. And then the most amazing thing, years later, I was on another trip just walking the streets of Paris, and I found his shop, and his sister was running the shop, and I told her the whole story. She had so many amazing, beautiful things. Didn't buy anything, but just sort of enjoyed closing the circle of that story.
That's fabulous.
So I guess what I'm trying to say there is curiosity and just getting engaged and talking to the people that are producing these beautiful things in the world also is a journey unto itself. People love to talk about their work. They love to talk about their art and their creative process. And so that's, again, part of the, cultural experience of travel.
That's fabulous. So on that note, we're going to end this episode. And I think that you will love episode 2, because in episode 2, we're going to be talking about some of the beautiful pieces of clothing that Sheila has brought, and a little bit of modeling maybe.
Not so much, if I can help it.
This episode was accessories. You can't have accessories without the foundation. So yeah, there's going to be some great pieces. So be sure that you stay tuned for that. And thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.